Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here, and while I'm still enjoying the latest M1 Macs that were just released, can you tell this channel has pretty much been pumping out Mac exclusive content for the last week or so. So I hope you've been enjoying that content. In fact, make sure you follow me over on Twitter so you can keep up to date with all of my thoughts on these new M1 Macs. And if you're someone that actually does follow me on Twitter and YouTube, what's wrong with you? Go get some help. But seriously, these M1 Macs are great, and they far exceeded my expectations of what Apple was able to do with their first laptop class and technically desktop class processors. And while I think a lot of you in the Greg's Gadgets community are equally as blown away as I am, you're also probably like me and wondering what's next, because as great as these Apple Silicon Macs are, they left a lot to be desired in terms of outward design changes, because these computers look exactly the same as the ones they replaced. They also only replace the entry-level machines, and many of you are used to the 4-port MacBook Pros or the expanded all-in-one beautiful Retina 5K display of the iMac with its superior port selection. Well, don't you worry, because we have a lot of rumors and leaks and some of my own research speculation. Can speculation even be researched? After using this first generation of Apple Silicon Macs. Well, let's get into it. So first of all, when can we expect the next lineup of Apple Silicon Macs? Well, most reports seem to indicate that the next refresh will occur sometime in 2021, with recent leaks from supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo saying that Apple will introduce new Apple Silicon Macs with all new form factors and a new industrial design in the second half of 2021. The second half of 2021 lines up nicely with Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, which usually takes place around June. Apple usually focuses on software launches at WWDC. However, they have shown off hardware in the past, and when they have shown new hardware off, they usually show off new Macs. Why? Well, because it's a developers conference, and the machines that developers do their work on is the Mac, not the iPad. So for those of you on the fence in the comment sections asking, should I pick up this first generation of Apple Silicon Macs? How long do I have to wait? Yes, you might have to wait at least another 6 to 7 months before you see the second generation. So you'll likely have to wait quite some time to get those higher end machines, with one possible exception, and that would be the new redesign for the iMac, more notably the smaller model. This was the only entry-level computer not updated by Apple with the M1 chip. Tracing back rumors and leaks, all the roads still point to the iMac being released in the first quarter of 2021. Apple usually holds some sort of March event or issues press releases around that time, and with Apple now able to do virtual events, it's possible that we could see some form of a March virtual event announcing new products, and hopefully one of them is this rumored iMac redesign. For this iMac, rumors are pointing to a major redesign, and boy, does this iMac need one, with slimmer bezels, an iPad Pro-like design language, which probably means that the sides will be flat, maybe speakers on the corner, 4 speakers on the corner, that would be cool, possibly and hopefully Face ID integrated into the camera, and just slim uniform bezels around the display with the possibility of rounded LCD corners, because this is going to be a major bezel reduction. The screen size is going to increase from 21.5 inches all the way to 24 inches, while probably having the same physical footprint. We may also see the mini LED display technology, which will lead to greater contrast ratios, increased brightness, and the ability to view HDR content. However, as great as an iMac redesign is, and I can't wait to see what it looks like, I think most of us want to know what the processor in this machine will be. Now, it is possible and plausible that Apple may choose to put an M1 chip inside of the 24-inch iMac, and honestly, that chip would be more than powerful enough for that line of Mac. However, I think that there's going to be a deviation for the next M1 chip, and more likely, Apple is going to borrow from the iPad naming scheme and call it the M1X, or maybe it will skip that naming scheme and just call it the M2. This M1X variant, according to rumors, will be a 12-core CPU design designed for Apple's more powerful iMacs and laptops like the 4-port 13-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros. For reference, the current M1 chip is an 8-core CPU design. This M1X chip would probably have 8 high-performance cores and 4 high-efficiency cores, bringing the 8 high-performance cores right in line with what we are currently getting in terms of Intel core counts on the 16-inch MacBook Pro. The M1 is already outperforming these higher-end Intel Macs in real-world use with very low power consumption and excellent thermals. In fact, the M1 is the fastest single-core chip that Apple offers in the Mac, and with an additional 4 performance cores, it's easy to imagine that these M1X Macs will outscore every other Intel Mac on the market, with the exception of the ridiculous high core counts you can get with the Mac Pro. And that's just insane to think about, because if you've seen my videos on the M1 Macs, you know how blown away I was by the performance of the M1 chip. The MacBook Air, without a fan in it, was literally faster at exporting a video than my 2019 maxed out iMac, that useless junk behind me. So I would honestly be fine if even this next iMac just had an M1 chip in it, but an M1X sounds like it would be quite a capable chip and could lead to double the multi-core performance. I think the biggest question regarding the M1X chip is how it will handle graphics. Right now, the lowest end Mac uses integrated graphics cards, which are pretty good for the machines they're in, but as Apple starts getting into their higher end models, Apple would traditionally use dedicated GPUs for products like the 27-inch iMac and the 16-inch MacBook Pro. As good as integrated graphics are on the M1, can an M1X's integrated graphics go toe-to-toe with a dedicated GPU, or will Apple have to add its own dedicated graphics chips to the Mac? Right now, we just don't know, but it seems unlikely that Apple would continue to use AMD GPUs in here, considering how tightly knit the new architecture is and how great Apple is doing in thermal and power efficiency. I don't think they want to give up any of those gains. I think another big question is, how much memory will you be able to put in these machines? Right now, the entry-level models have 16 gigabytes of unified memory. Now, while a lot of people think that this is a limitation of Apple's ARM architecture using the M1 chip, I think that has to do more with the fact that these were entry-level models. If you go back to the Intel versions of these entry-level machines, they also maxed out at 16 gigabytes of RAM. And while you could argue the Mac Mini had 64 gigabytes of RAM, notice that Apple didn't replace the high-end space gray Mac Mini, they just brought back the cheaper silver model. So if they're refreshing the low-end iMac, which rumors are suggesting, that means they would only need to get to the max RAM option it currently has in the smaller model, and that would be 32 gigabytes. And while some of these iMacs use dedicated graphics, Apple could end up using integrated graphics on these machines because on the lower end model, those integrated graphics could be good enough, especially for the users it's targeting. Especially if we see a boost in GPU performance like we usually do with Apple's X series chips. Now, although the iMac has a good shot at launching first based on these rumors, it could always still be pushed back even longer and possibly launch at WWDC 2021. Now, what we expect to see at WWDC 2021 is probably another virtual Apple event or some press releases around or before the event. Around this time, we are expecting Apple to refresh the higher end versions of its laptop lineup. That means the 4-port 13-inch MacBook Pro and the 16-inch MacBook Pro. For the 13-inch and the 16-inch, we are expecting a new form factor and new industrial design, according to Ming-Chi Kuo. And we've heard rampant rumors that the 13-inch MacBook Pro would come with slimmer bezels, resulting in a 14.1-inch display size. And for the 16-inch, we haven't heard any rumors about the display size increasing. But if Apple is reducing the bezels even more on the 16-inch model, especially if they're adding rounded corners, we could see the physical footprint of that device shrink slightly while retaining a 16-inch display. Like the iMac, these MacBook Pros are also rumored to be coming with new mini LED display technology. As for other changes, we've seen some patents that Apple is looking to add its Force Touch technology over on the MacBook Pro's Touch Bar. And that means that there's a possibility that Apple could get the touch bar buttons to feel like actual physical clicky buttons. Actually, if you have a recent MacBook Pro, that's what they're doing with the trackpad. The trackpad actually doesn't move and they're able to make it feel like a click. So if they can do that with the touch bar and make it feel like real keys, I think that would be a welcome change, and it might even change the perception of the touch bar if you're able to use it without looking down at the keyboard. As for the chip, I would expect the same rumored A1X or A2, whatever they decide to call it, all with Apple's 8 high-performance CPUs. Now, while we already covered the performance of the A1X earlier in this video, we didn't go over the energy saving and the thermal. So for these MacBook Pros, I would expect at least 20 hours of battery life on the 13-inch model and possibly 22 to maybe even 25 hours or more on the 16-inch model, especially if they're using the A1X chip in the 16-inch and it retains a 100 watt-hour battery. Packing that big of a battery with the incredible energy savings of the M1 chip or the M1X chip, that could lead to some seriously impressive battery life. Probably the best in any laptop ever. Again, the RAM and GPU are huge questions for me. How much RAM will the 16-inch get? Because right now it can go up to 64 gigabytes. And will it feature a dedicated GPU, or will Apple make the integrated GPU fast enough? Or will Apple just make its own dedicated GPU? These are questions I have swirling around in my head right now, and they remain the most uncertain specifics about Apple Silicon Macs going forward. But anyway, that's all we know about Apple's next generation of Apple Silicon Macs with the 24-inch iMac, 14-inch MacBook Pro, and 16-inch MacBook Pro. Please let me know what you think about them in the comments below. As always, if you like this video, be sure to give me a like. If you want to see more from my channel, well, make sure you're subscribed. If you're impatient like me and you can't wait for the next generation of Apple Silicon Macs, consider buying one of the current M1 Macs through my affiliate link in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.